The courtroom was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. My father, Thomas, sat 3 rows behind me, his hands folded, his jaw tight, like he was bracing for impact. My sister, Mackenzie, stared straight ahead, her face a mask of practiced indifference, pretending I did not exist. Then, the judge leaned forward. She did not look at me. She looked at my father and asked him one simple question. Just one, not about family loyalty, not about love, but about $120,000 and a responsibility he had spent years dodging. My father froze. The color drained from his face, and in that silence, I realized the truth did not need me to defend it anymore. Hannah has chosen to stand up for herself rather than keep a peace that was never real. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Like your only purpose was to be the safety net for everyone else's mistakes? Let me know your story down in the comments. I would love to know who is part of our community and what time it is for you right now. My name is Hannah. I am 31 years old and I am a senior surgical resident. In my world, every second counts, and precision is the difference between a pulse and a flat line. I have spent my entire adult life learning how to stay calm while everything around me is bleeding out. I thought that discipline was for my patients. I did not realize I was training to survive my own family. The unraveling did not start in that courtroom. It started during a double shift at the hospital. The hallway smelled like industrial antiseptic and the stale, burnt scent of the coffee that keeps us alive. I was leaning against a cold tile wall, waiting for my pager to buzz, when my personal phone vibrated instead. A credit alert. A significant change detected. I almost swiped it away. I track my finances the way I track a patient's vital signs. Methodical, precise, and with zero room for error. But when I tapped the notification, the numbers staring back at me felt like a sudden drop in blood pressure. My credit score, which had been a healthy 760 just 3 months ago, had plummeted over 300 points. That is not an accident. That is a catastrophe. I sat down on the floor of the hallway because my legs, quite simply, stopped working. I pulled up the full report, and the names hit me like a series of blunt force traumas. Capital 1, Chase, Discover, 7 different credit cards I had never applied for, all maxed out, all with missed payments and late fees, stacking up like a sepsis infection. The total debt was $120,342. I called the first bank on the list. My voice sounded clinical, detached, like I was reporting a lab result. I told the representative there must be a mistake. She paused for a long beat. "Ma'am," she said, her voice softening, "these accounts were opened using your social security number. The billing address on file is in your name." Then she read the address. It was my parents' house, my childhood home, the place where my father, Thomas, still keeps his tools, and my mother, Kimberly, still hangs our holiday photos. I did not cry. I did not ask why. Anger was not loud this time. It was a cold, sharp blade. I looked at the transaction history, online shopping sprees, designer boutiques, a weekend at a 5-star spa. And then I saw it. A balance transfer fee dated exactly on my birthday. I thought of Mackenzie's recent Instagram posts, the new designer boots, the high-end skincare hauls, the captions about investing in her best self and starting a new chapter. Mackenzie is 34. She has always been the sensitive one, the genius who was too fragile for the real world. My parents had spent decades convincing me that because I was strong, I did not need anything. Because I was successful, my purpose was to absorb the impact of Mackenzie's failures. I had been the silent investor in their version of a family, but I had never signed a contract for this. I stood up, smoothed my white coat, and walked back to the computer terminal. With the same focus I used to scrub into surgery, I began the process of amputation. I did not hesitate. I opened my laptop and started clicking cancel on every account. I reported every single charge as fraudulent. I flagged my social security number and initiated a total freeze. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years. This was not a breakdown. It was an accounting. I have spent 31 years believing that my strength was a gift. Now, looking at the wreckage of my credit report, I realize it was a target. In my family, being the strong one was not a compliment. It was a job description I never applied for. While I was working 3 jobs to pay for my undergraduate textbooks, my parents were financing Mackenzie's sorority fees and her artistic retreats. I ate ramen in a library carol while she posted photos from her Greek life formals. All of it paid for by Thomas and Kimberly. Every time I achieved something, getting into medical school, landing a prestigious residency, saving my first patient, the response was always the same. That is wonderful, Hannah. You are so resilient. Now, can you help your sister with her car payment? They leaned on me because I was sturdy, and they let Mackenzie drift because she was sensitive. I accepted this because I was caught in the invisible shackle of the survivor. For decades, I lived in a prison without bars. My parents had built the walls out of guilt and the ceiling out of my own competence. They taught me that my value was measured by how much of their burden I could carry. I thought I was being the hero of the family story. I did not realize I was just the shock absorber for Mackenzie's entitled life. I stayed silent because I thought that was what love looked like. I thought if I just worked a little harder, if I was just a little more successful, they would finally see me not as a resource, but as a person. The financial ledger of my life is a record of one-way transactions. When Thomas lost his job 4 years ago, I was the one who sent $400 every single month for 2 years. When Kimberly needed a surgery that insurance would not fully cover, I paid the $7,000 copay using my graduation gift money. I did not ask for a thank you note. I just wanted them to be okay. But while I was quietly sending money home, Mackenzie was digging through my history. She did not just take my social security number. She took the future I had bled for. She and my parents had turned my life into a revolving credit line for her whims. I realized then that my compassion had not been a bridge to my family. It had been a subscription, and I was the only one footing the bill. I looked at the framed photo on my desk, the 3 of us at my white coat ceremony. Thomas and Kimberly were smiling, but their eyes were already on Mackenzie, who was pouting because the restaurant I chose did not have the right aesthetic for her feed. I realized I had been the silent investor in my own destruction. The contract was over. I reached for my phone and started drafting the legal notice. I was no longer a martyr. I was a senior surgical resident, and I knew exactly how to remove a parasite. The doorbell rang at exactly 7:58 p.m. I did not have to look through the peephole to know who was standing there. The air in the hallway usually smelled like the lavender candle I keep on the console table. But as soon as I opened the door, it was replaced by the scent of my father's expensive tobacco and my mother's floral perfume. Thomas and Kimberly did not wait for an invitation. They stepped into my living room, looking around my modest space with an expression that sat somewhere between pity and disappointment. My father did not say hello. He did not ask how my 36-hour shift had gone. He simply crossed his arms and looked at me, as if I were the one who had committed a crime. "You have officially crossed a line," Hannah Thomas said, his voice dropping into that low, threatening register he used to control the house. "Your sister is hysterical! Your mother has been up all night." You reported Mackenzie to the police over a few credit cards. This is family business. We handle this internally. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, my movements slow and deliberate. I felt a strange sense of clarity. I told him it was not a few credit cards. It was $120,000. It was my medical license. It was my future. My mother, Kimberly, began to dab at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, a performance I had seen 1,000 times before. She told me I was being too dramatic. She said Mackenzie was just struggling, and that she had intended to pay it back once her influencer career took off. This is the trap of normalized cruelty. My parents did not see themselves as villains. In their minds, they had spent 30 years building an ecosystem where my role was to be the provider and Mackenzie's role was to be the consumer. They had normalized the idea that my hard work belonged to everyone, while Mackenzie's whims were hers alone. They truly believed that for me to demand accountability was an act of aggression against the family peace. To them, my strength was not something to be respected. It was a resource to be harvested. They were not shocked by what Mackenzie had done. They were shocked that I had finally stopped playing the part of the willing victim. Mackenzie did not even bother to show up to the confrontation. While my parents were in my living room, trying to gaslight me into silence, my phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. Mackenzie had just posted a photo from a rooftop bar, holding a cocktail that probably cost $50. She was wearing the $3,000 boot she had charged to my name. The caption read, "Protecting my energy and living the life I was meant for. Some people just want to see you fail." I showed the screen to my father. I asked him if this looked like someone who was struggling. He did not even look at the phone. He just told me to stop being vindictive. "If you do not call the detective and drop this by tomorrow morning," Thomas said, pointing a finger at me, "do not bother calling us again. You will be dead to this family." I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel the need to apologize. I did not feel the urge to fix his anger. I told him that if loyalty to this family required me to set my own life on fire to keep Mackenzie warm, then I was already gone. I opened the door and waited. They walked out, my mother sobbing about how cold I had become, and my father muttering about my lack of character. I locked the deadbolt and engaged the chain. It was exactly 8:15 p.m. The silence that followed was not lonely. It was the sound of a debt being settled. I called Sarah the following Monday morning. Sarah had been my roommate during our pre-medical days, but she had chosen the law while I chose the scalpel. She was a partner at a high-stakes litigation firm now, known for her ability to find the one loose thread that could unravel an entire empire of lies. We met in her office on the 34th floor. The room smelled like expensive mahogany, fresh stationery, and cold air conditioning. She did not offer me coffee or ask how I was sleeping. She just tapped a thick manila folder on her desk and looked at me with eyes that had seen every version of human greed. "Hannah, I need you to look at this very carefully," she said. Her voice was flat, the way mine gets when I have to tell a family their loved one did not make it. She opened the folder and slid a single page toward me. It was a loan application for a home equity line of credit. The paper was heavy, the kind of high-quality bond that banks use to make debt feel official. The lender was a regional bank I had never done business with. The amount requested was exactly $120,000. I looked at the bottom of the page. My signature was there, written in the neat, cursive script I have used since high school. Years ago, my parents added my name to the house deed, under the guise of estate planning, to avoid probate. They told me it was a gift to secure my future. I was a busy medical student then, and I trusted them. I didn't realize that by making me a co-owner, they were actually using my medical license and near-perfect credit score as collateral for their financial failures. It was a trap disguised as an inheritance. My eyes traced the loops of the H in my name. It was chillingly accurate. Mackenzie had clearly spent hours practicing that signature, sitting in her childhood bedroom while I was at the library, perfecting the tool she would use to bury me. But I was in the middle of a 16-hour surgery rotation in a different city on the day that document was signed. I had never seen that paper in my life. Mackenzie had not just stolen my credit cards. She had committed a federal crime by forging my name to leverage the equity in my parents' house. "Look at the wire transfer history," Sarah prompted, her voice tight. She turned the page to the banking logs. I watched the flow of the $120,000. It did not go to Mackenzie's personal account. It did not go to pay off the boutique hotel stays or the designer bags she had already run up. Within 48 hours of the loan being approved, the entire $120,000 was wired directly into the business account of Thomas Henderson Consulting, my father's firm, the company he had bragged about for 20 years. The business, he said, was built on hard work and integrity. It was a forged empire. Thomas was not protecting Mackenzie because she was his pride and joy. He was protecting her because she was his partner in crime. He had known about the stolen identity from the very beginning. He had likely helped her facilitate it. Mackenzie provided the credentials, and Thomas provided the bank account to wash the money through, trying to save a consulting firm that was already dead. He had traded my future for a few more months of a legacy that was built on theft. I felt a final, frozen pulse of clarity. This was the lethal discovery. This was the moment I realized the people who raised me did not just fail to love me. They had actively targeted me for their own preservation. They had expected me to absorb the criminal consequences of a six-figure felony while they lived in a house I was unknowingly paying for. I told Sarah to prepare the subpoenas and contact the district attorney's office. This was not a family disagreement anymore. It was a criminal autopsy. The courtroom returned to that heavy, suffocating silence. I sat with my back straight, my surgical training keeping my breathing shallow and silent, while Judge Morrison reviewed the financial logs. My father, Thomas, was still standing, his chin tilted up, as if he were waiting for a medal for his loyalty to Mackenzie. My mother, Kimberly, sat behind him, a crumpled tissue in her hand, looking at me with eyes that said I was the one on trial. I felt like I was back in the hospital hallway, smelling that burnt coffee, and realizing that the people who were supposed to be my home were actually my predators. Mr. Henderson, the judge said, her voice like a cold scalpel cutting through a lie. You spent the last 20 minutes testifying that your daughter, Mackenzie, merely made a mistake. You've stated that this should have been handled at the dinner table, with quiet apologies and a shrug of the shoulders. You've even gone as far as to call Hannah, a doctor who dedicates her life to saving others, vindictive for involving the authorities in a felony crime. She paused, her eyes dropping to the wire transfer records and the forged loan documents that my attorney had methodically submitted. The records show that the $120,000 obtained through this fraud was funneled directly into your consulting firm, a firm that, according to these tax returns, was exactly 3 months away from total insolvency. Thomas's jaw tightened, and a single vein throbbed in his temple. He did not look at the files. He did not have to. He knew exactly what was in them, because he had watched the balance in his business account rise as mine plummeted. Then, the judge leaned forward and asked the question that ended 31 years of my life as their designated victim. At any point since this was discovered, did you offer to repay, co-sign, or otherwise assume responsibility for the $120,000 that was used to save your business and fund your lifestyle? The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the hum of the overhead lights. I could hear my mother's breathing turn into a frantic, rhythmic hitch. Thomas opened his mouth, but his voice had failed him. The smugness he had worn like armor since I was a child was gone, leaving only the hollow, diminished core of a man who had systematically stolen from one daughter to protect the fragile image of another. I thought she was strong enough to handle it, he finally whispered to the floor. Handle it? The judge repeated, her voice rising with a controlled fury that made Mackenzie flinch. You expected her to absorb the criminal liability, the ruined credit, and the professional death of a six-figure felony, so you wouldn't have to admit you were failing. Accountability is not cruelty, Mr. Henderson. It is justice. A family that truly loved this victim would never have expected her to set her entire career on fire to keep you warm. The gavel fell with a finality that vibrated in the soles of my shoes. Mackenzie was ordered to pay full restitution, including interest every single cent of that $120,000. Thomas and Kimberly were referred to the district attorney's office for investigation into their role as the primary beneficiaries of the identity theft. As the bailiff stepped forward to lead Mackenzie away, she finally turned around. She did not look like the pride of the family anymore. She looked like a cornered animal. She hissed a single word at me through the gap in the partition. Heartless. I stood up, smoothing my navy blazer, my hands finally steady. I did not feel heartless. I felt clean. I looked at the man who had raised me to be a resource, and the sister who had harvested me until I was empty. No, I said, my voice as calm as a recovery room. This isn't heartless. This is just the final accounting. And you are officially overdrawn. The fallout was swift and clinical. Mackenzie accepted a plea agreement 4 weeks after the hearing, pleading guilty to identity theft and credit card fraud. She received a 2-year suspended sentence and 5 years of probation, But the real weight was the $120,000 in full restitution she was ordered to pay back. If she misses a single monthly payment, her probation is violated, and she serves the full sentence in a cell. At her income level, that debt will follow her for more than a decade, a permanent ledger of her own choices. Thomas and Kimberly did not fare any better. Unable to pay the legal fees or the restitution they were partially liable for as beneficiaries of the fraud, their home went to auction 3 months later. The house my father repainted every other summer, the house where he believed his pride and joy could do no wrong, was sold to a stranger. They moved into a small, one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood they used to mock. My father texted me once, a single line asking for forgiveness, but I realized I did not need to answer. I had already forgiven myself for being the one who stayed silent for too long. The hospital board cleared my record entirely after Sarah submitted the certified court documents. 2 months later, I was officially appointed as the chief surgical resident. My career was no longer hanging by a thread. It was sturdier than ever because I had handled a personal crisis with professional integrity. I sat in my new apartment one evening, the one with a view of the city that did not smell like mahogany or tobacco. I opened my old finance spreadsheet, the one where I had tracked every cent of the debt Mackenzie ran up in my name. I stared at the numbers one last time. Then I hit delete. This was not revenge. This was accounting. Real justice is not just about the punishment of the past. It is about what you plant for the future. I used the first restitution check I received, $412, to seed the Medical Integrity Foundation. It provides legal support and financial counseling for residents and young doctors who are being exploited by their own families. It is my real inheritance. I learned that the best way to heal is not to hold on to the people who broke you, but to build something beautiful enough that their absence no longer feels like a loss. My father used to say, "Family is everything." Now I know that character is everything, and family is just where you find it among people who respect the truth. I am no longer the safety net. I am simply Hannah, and for the first time in my life, I am fine. We do not heal by staying quiet. We heal by telling the truth together. If the story of my journey from the invisible daughter to a woman who stands in her own light has given you the courage to set your own boundaries, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe so we can continue these conversations about truth, justice, and the peace that comes from choosing yourself. Thank you for listening.